September 12, 1942, on Guadalcanal, 800 exhausted United States Marines found themselves staring into what every rule of warfare defined as certain death, a tactical nightmare so complete that no field manual offered a solution beyond retreat. Yet Lieutenant Colonel Merritt, Red Mike Edson, faced with intelligence confirming that roughly 2,500 Japanese troops under Major General Kyoto Kawaguchi were maneuvering through the suffocating jungle to surround his position on the narrow ridge south of Henderson Field, rejected every conventional answer and chose instead a decision that would redefine defensive warfare in the Pacific. He ordered his Marines to tighten their perimeter, to let the enemy come closer, to allow themselves to be surrounded, trusting not in numbers but in preparation, terrain, discipline, and the controlled violence of modern firepower, because the ridge, barely 60 feet high, a low spine of coral and volcanic rock stretching roughly 1,000 yards, north to south, was not just ground on a map but the thin, fragile barrier between American control of Henderson Field and catastrophic defeat across the Pacific Theater, the airstrip lying less than 1,000 yards away, close enough for the Marines to hear aircraft engines coughing to life in the pre-dawn darkness, and Edson knew that if the ridge fell, the field would follow, and if Henderson Field fell, Guadalcanal itself would be lost. For over a month the Marines had fought the jungle as much as the enemy, enduring humidity that scorched metal by day and slicked it with condensation by night, canvas that rotted within weeks, food that spoiled within days, weight loss they could not afford, tropical diseases that drained strength and morale. Yet they had also learned to listen to the jungle, to read its silences, to hear the faint betrayals of movement through dense undergrowth. And Edson had positioned his forces with deliberate precision, the 1st Raider Battalion anchoring the northern section closest to the airfield, the 1st Parachute Battalion covering the southern approaches, their fields of fire overlapping to form a lattice of death across every approach, supported by mortars, wire obstacles, pre-registered artillery targets, and machine guns placed where they could enfilade any assault, knowing full well that Japanese doctrine emphasized shock, speed, and the willingness to absorb horrific casualties to close with the enemy, and knowing too that Kawaguchi's men were veterans hardened by earlier victories, men who believed in the spiritual supremacy of the attack. As darkness thickened on the night of September 13th, the jungle's normal chorus faded into an unnatural silence, the kind every experienced Marine recognized as the prelude to contact, and Edson moved through his lines with the calm steps of a man who had already accepted the mathematics of death, pausing beside positions where Marines checked rifles, grenades, and ammunition, including Gunnery Sergeant John Basilone, crouched behind his water-cooled Browning M1917 machine gun, a 41-pound relic of the previous war capable of sustained fire that could shred attacking infantry at hundreds of yards, Basilone answering Edson's quiet question about ammunition with understated confidence, knowing he had enough to make the enemy think twice, while nearby Private First Class Robert Mard, barely 3 weeks on the island, lay dug in with his Springfield rifle and fixed bayonet. His uniform already hanging loose from jungle-induced weight loss, his eyes sharpened by the knowledge that death could erupt from any direction without warning. Intelligence reports crackled over radios as Japanese forces were spotted moving along 3 separate approaches, voices occasionally carrying through the darkness in clipped Japanese commands, and at 11:45 p.m. scattered mortar rounds began falling on the ridge, poorly coordinated but unmistakably announcing that the assault had begun. Edson taking his position at the sandbagged command post on the ridge's highest point, maintaining contact with Henderson Field's artillery batteries already loaded and trained on predetermined targets, and when the first wave of Japanese infantry burst from the tree-lean screaming banzai cries meant to shatter morale, they instead ran headlong into a defense that refused to break, as disciplined Marine fire erupted across the slopes. Basilone's machine gun opening up at long range, its heavy slugs cutting lanes through the charging ranks, rifles cracking in steady cadence, mortars dropping with lethal accuracy into tightly packed formations, because Edson had spent days studying every fold of ground, every approach, every possible avenue of advance, clearing fields of fire and creating killing zones that funneled attackers into overlapping arcs of destruction, and where Japanese doctrine sought spiritual victory through shock, American doctrine sought physical annihilation through firepower. The terrain itself betrayed the attackers, forcing them uphill into exposed slopes where muzzle flashes revealed their positions, allowing Marines trained to shoot by sound and flash to pick off leaders, systematically eroding cohesion, and as the first wave collapsed, the second emerged only to find the ground ahead littered with bodies, momentum already gone. Mortar rounds detonating with pre-calculated precision among the ranks, Japanese non-commissioned officers falling under aimed fire, and Edson, monitoring reports and calling in artillery support, recognized that Kawaguchi had committed heavily and was now trapped by his own assumptions as Henderson Field's guns joined the fight. 155mm howitzers delivering shells that shattered jungle and flesh alike, each explosion creating a lethal radius no human courage could overcome. While Marine squads executed limited counterattacks, small, aggressive thrusts led by seasoned NCOs that disrupted enemy formations. Before they could regroup, denying the Japanese any chance to establish firing positions within effective range, by midnight the assault had devolved into scattered, desperate attacks, the jungle falling into eerie silence between bursts of gunfire as survivors crawled back into the undergrowth. Yet Kawaguchi was not finished, and before dawn on September 14th he prepared a final effort, adapting his tactics by breaking his remaining forces into smaller infiltration groups intended to slip through gaps, neutralize machine guns and mortars at close range, and collapse the defense from within, a shift that became apparent as listening posts reported movement in previously quiet sectors, prompting Edson to commit his reserve, his most experienced Marines, to counter these penetrations, leading to savage close-quarters fighting in the darkness where individual initiative mattered more than formations, where Private Mard fired at shapes rising from the undergrowth, stopping a grenade-wielding infiltrator with a single shot, where Bassilone's position was nearly overrun, forcing him and his crew to fight with pistols, rifle stocks, and finally his Thompson submachine gun, killing a Japanese soldier who reached the machine gun itself, his body collapsing across the tripod. And though the fighting was chaotic and brutal, it exposed the fatal weakness of Kawaguchi's revised approach, because by dispersing his remaining strength he had sacrificed the mass needed to break through, allowing Marines to defeat each infiltration group in detail. Aided by artillery called in at dangerously close distances, shells bursting just yards from friendly positions, illuminating the jungle in hellish flashes that revealed Japanese soldiers scrambling for cover among twisted roots and fallen logs. As dawn approached, daylight threatened to expose what remained of Kawaguchi's forces to annihilation, and shortly after 5 a.m. the Japanese began withdrawing under ineffective mortar cover, abandoning equipment and wounded comrades in their haste. While Edson ordered his Marines to hold fast and avoid pursuit, understanding that his mission was defensive and already accomplished, and when the sun rose it revealed a battlefield that defied belief, the approaches to the ridge carpeted with bodies, equipment scattered across the jungle floor, evidence of repeated assaults shattered by disciplined fire, while Marine casualties numbered fewer than 50 killed and wounded, an exchange ratio that would have seemed impossible to analysts studying the initial odds. Reconnaissance patrols soon counted over 700 Japanese dead, with many more wounded, evacuated during the retreat, and the defeat effectively ended Japanese offensive capability on Guadalcanal, securing Henderson Field and enabling American air power to choke Japanese supply lines, marking a strategic turning point in the Pacific War, because the ridge, soon to bear Edson's name, had proven that numerically inferior defenders, properly trained, led, and equipped, could annihilate a superior attacking force, shattering the myth of Japanese invincibility and exposing the limitations of doctrine built on spiritual assault rather than technological and tactical reality. For the Marines, the aftermath was sobering as well as triumphant, Private Mard stepping out of his fighting hole after 6 hours of continuous combat to stare hollow-eyed at the devastation, Bassilone cleaning carbon fouling from his machine gun after nearly 4,000 rounds fired without mechanical failure. patrols cataloging abandoned weapons and documents that revealed Japanese organization and planning, intelligence officers noting that many enemy soldiers suffered from malnutrition and disease, symptoms of an overstretched logistical system, while American losses, 43 killed and 97 wounded, represented irreplaceable experience but also validated Edson's leadership. His controversial decision to allow encirclement, maximizing firepower and forcing the enemy into exposed uphill attacks, and as reports filtered into Japanese headquarters, the scale of disaster became undeniable. Kawaguchi's brigade reduced to a shattered remnant, companies reporting 60% casualties or more, units disappearing entirely, survivors straggling through the jungle in disorganized groups, revealing a doctrinal blind spot in Japanese planning that had never adequately considered withdrawal or defeat, while American commanders drew confidence and clarity from the victory, reinforcing training philosophies centered on small unit leadership, individual marksmanship, and aggressive combined arms defense. The political and psychological impact resonated far beyond Guadalcanal, bolstering American morale at a critical moment and forcing Japanese strategists to confront the reality that Western soldiers, far from collapsing under pressure, could match and surpass Japanese forces when properly prepared. And for Edson himself, the battle became a case study in command under fire. His calm presence and trust in his Marines exemplifying leadership that would be studied for generations, because the Ridge was more than a tactical success. It was the moment American tactical supremacy in the Pacific was born, proven in blood and fire in the humid darkness of Guadalcanal, where 800 Marines stood their ground against impossible odds and changed the course of the war.